argued that the immediate gas price hikes were unfair and unnecessary.
When they raised their prices 4 or 5 cents overnight, they didn't have delivery last night.
And I don't think anyone should be using this invasion as an excuse to force the prices of oil out of sight. And if that occurs, then the United States needs to do something.
The economic aspects of this are well known to the American people, and fortunately right now there's a bit of an overhang of surplus crude. But that's short run. And long run, economic effects on the free world could be devastating, and that's one of the reasons I'm as concerned as I am.
Despite that concern, President Bush refused to discuss military options against Iraq, at least not publicly, although he did send more U.S. warships to the Persian Gulf to shore up American presence there. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers lined up behind the president, but couldn't resist calling Hussein a few names.
He is the new Hitler of this era. He's committed acts of genocide against his own people.
I think we need to reflect as we see what the bloodthirsty terrorist Saddam Hussein, with blood dripping from his hands, is attempting to do.
On Friday, many observers felt Iraq had crossed the line in the sand when the State Department learned Iraq had apparently set its sights on Saudi Arabia, which provides 15% of U.S. oil imports.
We believe the Iraqis are probably within 5 to 10 miles of the Saudi border.
Iraq's ambassador denied the report.
You have no intention of invading Saudi Arabia?
Whatsoever. This is just a big lie.
Why are the troops 5 miles from the border?
This is what you say. There is no such a, there is not an iota of truth to that.
What is the status?
President Bush said his administration would help the Saudis in any way it could, but again, he stopped short of calling for military intervention. Iraq has made it clear the West should stay out of the conflict, threatening to turn Kuwait into a graveyard if outsiders interfere. Arab states agree the Iraq-Kuwait conflict should be settled internally. By week's end, Baghdad Radio reported Iraqi troops would begin withdrawing from Kuwait within a few days. The U.S. met the report with skepticism, but with hope. I'm David French, CNN, reporting.
Of one reporter who arrived in Jordan today.
Now, sometimes, you know how they would always repeat the propaganda lines they hear on radio. No more television in Iraq, by the way, but Baghdad Radio continues to broadcast despite all the hit on communications facilities. Somehow, it's broadcasting. And people do repeat what they hear on the radio. Nobody wants to appear defiant of Saddam Hussein. But as before, I get a sense that a lot of people believe this, that, you know, we're just beginning to fight. We will win the war. You know, let the Americans bomb us. We're still here. We're going to survive. We're going to win. It's interesting to see people and to hear people saying that in my sort of unauthorized sorties on shopping streets and so forth, and in my looks at tiny little stalls that would open up for a few hours a day, you know, to sell cigarettes and water and soft drinks and things. I would chat with people there, and they would say things like that. And now we will attack Israel. Now, you know, et cetera. What they hear on the radio, but they say it with optimism, as if they mean it.
Still ahead, we'll talk with an expert on what the Geneva Convention says about prisoners of war. I'm Molly McCoy.
And I'm Rick Moore. Our coverage of the war in the Gulf continues.
Among 766 adults on Thursday and Friday. The president's overall approval rating stands at 82%, up 18 percentage points from the final pre-war poll taken last week. On his handling of the Gulf, Mr. Bush checks in with an 86% approval rating, and on the decision to go to war, 82% of those surveyed agree with the president's decision. The margin of error in that poll is plus or minus 4 percentage points. The Persian Gulf War is coming home to the United States in a multitude of ways. Throughout the nation, people are gathering to talk about the war and pray for their loved ones. CNN's Jeff Block has details.
From a cattle auction in Emporia, Kansas, to a college campus in Columbia, Missouri, to a factory outside St. Louis, the nation's heartland is waiting, watching, and wondering about the war in the Gulf. And right now, the heartland seems to support it.
I'm behind the president all the way.
I think he did what he had to do.
Push came to shove, and something needed to be done, and I think he's doing a wonderful job.
I think they did the right thing by going over and getting that guy out of business.
I'm awfully glad we finally went in. I think we had no choice but to go in and get it over with.
But support does not mean that people are not worried.
It's pretty scary.
Scary for everyone, I think.
In a high school classroom, they are scared about the war escalating.
If the world leaders do, in fact, recognize the potential dangers of using nuclear weapons.
At this grocery store, a man is scared about losing his friends now in the Army.
I would hate to see any of my friends get killed.
At this diner, a man is scared about his country being left to fight a war alone.
I'm in constant fear that with the attack on Israel, now the whole Arab coalition is going to back Iraq, and that's got me worried.
What they worry about, they talk about. From the men at this barber shop in Missouri to the women at this hairstyling salon in Kansas.
I can't imagine what it might be like to have a loved one there. I can't imagine what they must be feeling.
This man can. His son is now on a ship in the Gulf.
For the last 2 nights, I think I've probably had 2 hours sleep.
This woman has a husband there.
Once it all started happening, it was just very scary, and I'm just real worried about him.
This woman's grandson is somewhere in Saudi Arabia.
I pray every day and every night and all the time. I ride along in my car, I'm asking God for help.
Traveling up and down the main street of the heartland as we have, you begin to get a sense for how many people are truly touched by this war. From the sons of these cattlemen to the friends of these factory workers to the fiancés of these sorority sisters.
Our generation has no idea what it's going to be like to lose our friends and brothers over there.
It may have had no idea, but it is now beginning to find out. I'm Jeff Block, CNN, in Wichita, Kansas.
Most of our regular weekend programming has been preempted by our continuing coverage of the Persian Gulf crisis. However, many of our sports programs will air as scheduled. And another programming note coming up at 10:30 Eastern this morning on CNN, Newsmaker Sunday, with General Norman Schwarzenkoff, the commander of the Allied forces in the war in the Gulf.
Also to come at the top of the hour, we'll take a look at the language of war as CNN's coverage of the war in the Gulf continues. I'm Molly McCoy.
And I'm Rick Moore. Stay tuned.
Good morning, I'm Bobby Batista.
Good morning, I'm Bob Kane. Our public coverage of the Persian Gulf War continues. The latest Allied military targets in Iraq are Saddam Hussein's ground troops, the ones called elite Republican Guards, and the remaining mobile Scud missile launchers. Air raids continue today, and in its first detailed description, Baghdad says 14 attacks took place before dawn. Several U.S. bombers left Turkey today on missions apparently involving targets in northern Iraq. Journalists say the U.S. made 77 more sorties overnight. Officials will not reveal the targets. Israel is still considered a prime target for Iraq's response. To beef up the protection for Israeli citizens, U.S. Patriot anti-missile systems are in place, with U.S. military crews to help operate them. Iraq said today it had shot down 12 more Allied planes overnight, now claiming a total of 154 since the war began. The Allies say 10 aircraft have been lost. The boundaries of war are not the only things changing as the fighting escalates in the Gulf. CNN's Mark Leff explains.
Even before the U.S. Patriot missiles and their American crews made their much-publicized arrival in Israel Saturday, and more quietly in Turkey as well, the language of the conflict had begun subtly shifting. U.S. military spokesmen used different words to describe the multinational force whose task is to get Iraqi troops out of Kuwait, as they announced the first capture of Iraqi prisoners. from an offshore Kuwaiti oil platform.
The Iraqi forces have been firing on coalition aircraft.
I don't know that they hold any prisoners of war from the Allied forces.
28 nations are providing military equipment or people to the United Nations-backed effort. The French government says these pictures are from a French Air Force bombing raid on an ammunition dump in Kuwait.
It is very noticeable that the Allied forces have been using precision bombing techniques.
The phrase Allied forces has a historical ring to it for Britain and other nations that fought Germany in 2 world wars. And it also has a ring of permanence.
We're consulting with the United States, which is a very close ally.
Those consultations, which brought 2 senior U.S. officials back to Israel early Sunday morning by presidential order, began intensifying after the 2 waves of Iraqi Scud missiles hit in and around Tel Aviv. Scud, by the way, is a NATO code word for the big Iraqi ground-to-ground missiles the Soviets began building a quarter-century ago. The attacks brought worldwide concern that Israel would retaliate against Iraq, and by so doing, either join or threaten the mostly U.S., European, and Arab force.
Even if they do, I have no doubt whatsoever that the coalition will remain intact, as strong as ever.
Saddam Hussein's strategy of trying to draw everyone in, I think so far has not worked, and it's not worked because all the Arab partners in the coalition understand what he's trying to do.
Diplomats and reporters are beginning to use the word coalition more and more. It is, by definition, a temporary alliance of distinct parties for joint action or to achieve a common purpose. Iraqi radio has issued its first casualty report, saying that airstrikes killed 31 soldiers on Saturday and that Iraq had shot down 154 attacking planes. As the stated purpose of the multinational air bomb and missile campaign shifts from military places to the people in the Iraqi military's elite Republican Guard, the United States, Britain, Italy, and Kuwait said they'd lost a total of 9 aircraft in combat. The U.S. Defense Department, choosing its words carefully, lists 9 flyers as missing, not dead, and not missing in action. Although the deaths are not confirmed, using the phrase missing in action would indicate higher hopes of getting them back alive. Mark Leff, CNN, reporting.
Well, the world waits, as we know, for some kind of reaction from Israel in the midst of this conflict. In the meantime, as we heard, U.S. Patriot missiles have been set up and are being manned in central Israel by American soldiers. CNN's Linda Scherzer joins us now from our bureau in Jerusalem. Linda?
Bobby, there is a lot of activity going on here today between the U.S. and Israel. Just about an hour and a half ago, Under-Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger arrived in Israel for high-level consultations with the Prime Minister and members of his cabinet. You'll recall that exactly a week ago, Eagleburger was here. He tried and failed to get a commitment from the Israelis not to retaliate against Iraq if Israel was attacked. That position has changed now, and apparently the Israelis have agreed not to attack Iraq. That has a lot to do with the Patriot missiles. The Patriot missile batteries that the U.S. sent to Israel yesterday, this is a picture of them. They arrived with U.S. servicemen who are training the Israelis how to use them. The Patriots are being deployed in the central part of Israel to knock out any new missiles that the Iraqis may try to launch here. They are not 100% effective in securing the skies, but the Israelis are feeling a lot more secure and very encouraged by the way the United States is helping them out.
I think the relationship now between Israel and the United States is extremely good, very close, and the consultations are going on a senior level and all the time.
Of course, the Israelis have agreed not to respond now. I just wanted to clarify that for the moment. It's now been about 30 hours since the last missile attack on Israel, and life is returning to a semblance of normalcy here. It is the first day of the Israeli work week. Many people return to their jobs today, especially in the southern part of the country. Elsewhere, people ventured outside their homes to get some fresh air, to replenish their food supplies, to be ready for whatever may be coming in the days ahead. This is Linda Scherzer reporting live from Jerusalem.
Linda, by any chance, has the use of nuclear arms come into the discussions of any kind of reaction?
Not at all, Bobby. The Israelis have never admitted that they have a nuclear capability. The Israelis have said that they would never be the first country to introduce nuclear weapons here, but they would also not be the second country to introduce weapons in the Middle East. But as far as introducing or possibly using nuclear weapons in a strike against Iraq, that option, that possibility has never been discussed.
All right, our thanks to Linda Scherzer reporting live from Jerusalem. And when we continue here with our coverage of the Gulf, we'll go live with CNN's Larry Lamont at a church service in West Virginia. Stay with us.
It is Sunday morning. It is the first Sunday.
Early afternoon here in Baghdad. It's 3.5 days since the air bombardment and missile attacks began against the Iraqi capital and elsewhere in Iraq and Kuwait. There have been several alert sirens resounding through the city already today. The air and missile attacks have been continuing since the first strikes began. The International Press Corps that has been covering the story here has departed today. They've been ordered out by the government. However, CNN has been invited to remain to cover the developing story, leaving the three CNN man team the only Western journalists still in the country. An information ministry official said the decision to let CNN be here in Baghdad was based on the proven impartiality, he said, of the network in covering this story since its beginning. The CNN people here are executive producer Robert Wiener, satellite engineer Nick Robertson, and myself. We are assessing our stay here on an hour-to-hour basis. Our news reports are continuing to be subject to censorship by officials from the information ministry, and movement is still very restricted around the city, and photographs are not yet permitted. The Al Rashid Hotel, where we are staying, has become a haven for diplomats from several Arab and Asian countries. Most guests are spending their nights in the hotel bomb shelter. The Baghdad newspaper Al Thara, the organ of the Socialist Ba'ath Party, today headlines the Iraqi missile attack in Israel, telling the Palestinians, quote, "We are coming to liberate you," unquote. The headlines also claim that it was a, quote, "black day" on the U.S. Air Force. The paper claiming 142 aircraft have so far been shot down since the war began. The headlines praise the abilities of the Iraqi anti-missile teams. It claims 5 cruise missiles were destroyed yesterday, that's Saturday. Here in Baghdad, we saw 1 cruise missile that was shot down near the hotel. The debris landed in the staff quarters of the hotel and starting fires. The impact of the explosion blasted the CNN workspace in the lobby bar of the Al Rashid Hotel, breaking the plate glass windows and tossing producer Robert Wiener across the room, but he was unhurt. A second cruise missile passed by our window on the 10th floor of the hotel about 100 yards out. It was traveling from us. It continued on to hit a target elsewhere in the city. The first statistics have been given by the government on casualties. The newspaper Al Hara today reported that there were 40 dead civilians and 140 wounded in bombing of civilian targets. The paper also reported 31 dead and 51 wounded on the battlefield. As of this moment, early afternoon, it is quiet in Iraq's capital city. Peter Arnett, CNN, reporting live from Baghdad.
Peter, as we established yesterday in your telephone report from Baghdad, you are being censored by Iraqi officials, and it's my understanding that a censor official is there with you, and you have to be sensitive to what questions you can answer. But let me ask you this, if I may, to establish the reporting you're doing from Baghdad. Are you in any way being told what to say or merely being censored for the reports you prepare?
Oh, no, we're in no way being told what to say or otherwise controlled. We are being restricted to the hotel, but we are being permitted to look at television. We're getting translations, the newspaper headlines, the comment is being read to us, the content by information officials, but there is no attempt to force us to report anything that we wouldn't want to report. This report that I just read to you was given to an information official. He read it and he didn't change one word. So I think that we are being given the opportunity to report essentially what we're seeing. The problem is that we aren't seeing a lot, Rick.
All right, as we have been reporting, the Allied forces have taken the first Iraqi prisoners of war. Can you comment on that? Is that being reported on Iraqi TV?
The information ministry did say to us that last night on Iraqi television there would be video and pictures of American pilots captured and possibly interviews with them, but they did not come up on Iraqi television last night, so we haven't seen them yet. So that's all we can tell you about that.
All right, Peter, my question, though, was about Iraqi prisoners of war who were captured by the Allied forces. Has the fact that we have some, or that the Allied forces have prisoners of war now outside of Kuwait, has that been reported on Baghdad TV?
Iraqi television last night gave about half an hour's coverage of the war so far. It had three communiques from the Army, from the military high command, talking about different aspects of the conflict, encouraging people to remain strong-willed and be ready to fight. It did show 5 or 10 minutes of wreckage of what it says was civilian homes. It also showed what was said to be the wreckage of cruise missiles and cruise missiles, maybe parts of planes. That Iraqi television reported nothing about Iraqi soldiers or any military personnel being taken prisoner by the West. No, there was very little from little from the West. They did announce on television that they're offering rewards for any multinational force pilots found. It was 10,000 dinars for any Iraqi or Arab, any Arab who happened to capture a pilot, and they offered $20,000 for foreigners if they brought in pilots. But there was no mention of any Iraqi forces or any prisoners being taken by the multinational side.
Peter, can you set the scene for us on how you were told that CNN, that you and your crew would be allowed to stay in Baghdad? Was this after the rest of the international media had left Baghdad?
Well, that's a very good question. Why are we here? I think one of the reasons is that the CNN is picked up by the Foreign Ministry on their satellite here, as it is in apparently over 100 other countries. The CNN coverage of the whole war and reaction from around the world, I guess they feel that it's important to have us here to give the view from this part of the world. But beyond that, I don't really know why we were chosen to be here, other than what the Information Ministry official says, that they deem our reports impartial and balanced. Now, they have been seeing everything we've reported from here for the past 6 months, and so that's, I guess we'll stay with that reason. They feel it's been impartial, balanced reporting from CNN here and elsewhere in the world.
Peter, can you set the scene for us of what life is like in Baghdad now with this constant shelling from the Allied air forces? I know you've been reporting on food shortages, power outages.
Well, I can tell you what life is like in the hotel, because that's as far as we can basically get, other than we have been around the city. I can tell you the heavy populated areas of Baghdad where the Palestinians live and Saddam Hussein City, the poorer parts of the city, they don't have power or water apparently, but they have been undamaged from any aerial attacks. Here in the hotel, there is limited water on the ground floor, and there was auxiliary power within the hotel, but there's no city power reaching us, so conditions aren't very good for the people gathered. There aren't that many. As I said, they're mainly diplomats, and there were a lot of journalists here until this morning.
Peter, do you have knowledge yourself? Have you been able to see any of the primary buildings in Baghdad? Are they still standing? Has the presidential palace been attacked? What can you tell us about the damage caused by the air attacks?
Well, I'm sorry. There's nothing I can tell you about the damage on the city without having that perused by our Information Ministry officials. I think we've already reported on that, and I hope that the journalists who are going out have reported on that. Just one little note: in the hotel, there are Americans and Europeans from the Gulf Peace Team. They're here. Some of them are going, but some say they want to stay. Waiting for a group of Americans and others who have been at the Iraqi-Saudi Arabian border. They apparently will be arriving back here today. Some of these people want to stay in Iraq during the course of the war. Others are planning to go home.
What about the people of Baghdad? What can you tell us about them? How are they reacting to the war so far?
Well, we don't have much access to the people of Baghdad. They have been subject to bombing for 3 days. I mean, there is concern, obviously, but traffic, probably government traffic, the streets. Some of the stalls are open in the city. But I have been told by those Iraqi officials we meet here that their families are relatively safe. They're coming and going from the city. It's very hard, in fact, to pick up the mood of the city, to tell you the honest truth. But looking out our hotel window in the times we've been out, this is a city that hasn't been disrupted at all. It's functioning, and certainly the government seems to be functioning. The television is functioning for those who want to see it. But as I said, to make an overall assessment of what's really going on, it is very difficult here.
Peter, you mentioned what was being reported on Baghdad television. Have they made mention of the 2 missile attacks on Israel?
I don't know if you asked me if they mentioned the attacks on Israel. If that was the question, yes. The newspapers and television last night talked about the attacks on Israel. It talked about, with great pride, about what had been done. It said that the missiles would bury the Zionists. In fact, there was a lot of comments, several minutes, about that missile attack. They're obviously very proud here of having got these missiles off when it was apparently said in the West that all the missiles were destroyed. The announcer reading a military communique, one line he said was, "Palestine, we are coming to liberate you." And another said, "The Iraqis will never forget Palestine." So yes, they're making a lot of, they're obviously very proud here that they're able to get these attacks launched into Israel. Another line was, "Our grandfathers are happy in their graves when they see that their grandsons are defending Palestine." Now, the television and the newspaper are claiming that the Israelis have already attacked Iraq, that through Saudi Arabia, and in fact have joined the multinational forces. That's what they're telling their people here.
All right, Peter, finally, will we be able to look forward to other reports from you throughout the day?
That is subject to negotiation. I think this will be our last report for some time, unfortunately.
With regard to Peter's reference to himself and his CNN crew as the last Western journalist remaining in Baghdad, we do understand that a correspondent for the British-based news service WTN is still in Baghdad and is still working. Our coverage continues.
Do you know if the coalition forces were able to target and attack the sites where these Scuds came from today?
No, I don't know specifically whether, I just don't have the information on that one. I'm sorry, I just don't know.
Any more information on POWs, whether Americans are included in among those captured by Iraq?
No, I've heard those reports. We've all seen what was in the Iraqi television broadcast, but we have no independent confirmation that that's true. You'll all recall that yesterday we took some Iraqi prisoners of war and served notice on the Iraqi government here in Washington, a formal notice from the State Department that we intended to abide by the Geneva Convention on how prisoners of war to be treated, and we would certainly hope that the Iraqis will do the same. Last question, David, and then I'll...
You've seen what was in the Iraqi broadcast. Have you seen, or has this building actually seen videotape of these alleged POWs?
No, I mean, we've seen reports, written reports on what was said in the Iraqi broadcast, but I don't know yet that anyone here in the department has actually seen the video from the Iraqi broadcast. I first of all don't know how many people in Iraq have seen it, since I think the power is out in much of Baghdad. But we haven't been able to intercept the transmission. I don't think anyone here has seen the video yet. If we have anything further this afternoon, I will get back to you. Thank you.
Pentagon spokesman Pete Williams. All right, emerging out of the confusion of the numbers now this afternoon, we have according to the Pentagon, 2 Scud missiles launched by the Iraqis and 5 anti-missile missiles fired back at them. Those are the Patriot missiles. He says 2 of those Patriot missiles hit the target. One apparently hit some debris, and the other 2 hit a missile that had already been imploded and exploded. Let's go now to Tony Kordersman. Tony, what does this say about the Scud missiles? He says that apparently there was no injury caused by them. What does this say about the precision of these missiles and the ability to hit the target?
They're not precise missiles, regardless of which variant they fired. Even under optimal conditions, they won't get within 2 to 6 kilometers 50% of the time. We have to be careful, however. We think that these are probably relatively low-weight warheads on these missiles, but if they have a high-weight chemical warhead that is similar to the Soviet warhead on their Scud, that could cover an area from 7 to 20 kilometers with lethal nerve gas. So accuracy is not always, unfortunately, the issue.
These, of course, were conventional warheads, not chemical warheads. Again, I guess the question is, should the U.S. take any consolation from that? Does all of these missile attacks, we now have 11 in Israel, and we have the one from the other day in Saudi Arabia, and we also have these two, a total of 9. Does this mean that he can't launch chemical explosives? Would he have done it by now?
No, it doesn't mean that at all. He may be reserving chemical warheads for the last moment. In addition, his aircraft can carry perhaps 10 to 20 times as many chemical weapons as his missiles possibly could, and he may have aircraft surviving to the very last moment. And that means that there's going to have to be a hair-trigger defense probably throughout the entire conflict, and there'll be many air raids. Everyone is going to have to take shelter, have to suit up the moment they get an indication of an attack. Some Scud launchers could survive virtually to the end of the conflict.
You talk about a hair-triggered defense, and we talked a bit about the nerves of steel of those men sitting watching the sky, waiting to see if a Scud comes in. Give us a sense of the timing. How much time do they have to react and to fire the Patriot, and then how much time does the Patriot have?
Well, under certain conditions, we have intelligence systems that might give warning of a launch, detecting the infrared emissions that come from the tail of the missile. Under other conditions, they might only get anywhere from 6 to 2 minutes of actual warning that the missiles are coming. They probably will have to keep their Patriots armed and ready on the basis that if any object is detected, they can instantly fire. If one should get through, there would probably be something like a loud bang in the air, and it would release chemical agent. We have no idea how much. Then it will be up to the atmosphere to disperse that agent. It could be anywhere from perhaps 2 minutes till it hits the ground. We call it a gas, but it's actually a vapor. Or it could simply move along the surface of the Earth, taking 10 to 20 minutes. To actually protect yourself, it takes at least 2 minutes to get into one of those suits, and that gives an idea of just how horrifying it is for the people who are under attack.
All right, Tony Cordesman, we're going to go now to Mort Dean, who is standing by in eastern Saudi Arabia. I guess, Mort, we're always kind of confounded and astounded by the speed with which things seem to return to normalcy, to normality after one of these. What's going on there now?
Well, I'm not sure things return to normalcy here after an alert such as this. It is a frightening experience, and it takes a while for people in the area to get out of their bomb shelters and remove their gas suits and begin to assess what might have happened. There have been some reports around here, and they are as yet not confirmed, of some damage raining down from the sky, and by that I mean some debris, and we're investigating that right now. I might just tell you that the area in which we are located is surrounded by what the military would call very heavy assets. There is a major airfield here, and that's what Saddam Hussein's target is. And there are many, many Patriot missiles located in the general area. And to tell you a personal tale, I'm absolutely delighted that they work tonight, and I'm sure many people are.
Now, the Pentagon spokesman, Pete Williams, said that there was report of no injury or no report of any injury. Could you have any sense now how far away they landed, if any landed?
Well, we don't know that, Diana, and maybe Tony could correct me. I think the Patriot missiles have the ability of traveling some 20 miles to meet their target. The other night, when a Patriot missile did encounter a Scud missile, it was within eye view, just a short distance from here, up over our hotel complex here.
Tony, what...
And, go ahead, Diana.
I'll interrupt you just for a second to make sure we have that precise. Tony?
Well, the figures are classified, but the Patriot has a range of at least 50 miles. It has a speed of at least Mach 3. That's 3 times the speed of sound. And this performance so far, incidentally, is absolutely astounding. This system has been deployed since 1983, and it has been tested thousands of times. This is the first real test in combat, and it's performed superbly.
Back to you for a minute more. You're saying the other night it was right overhead, but you don't have a sense this was?
I'm sorry, I could not quite hear you, Diane.
You're saying that the first one that came in, which the Patriot intercepted, seemed to be right overhead. Any sense how far away this one was?
No, I could not see any explosions from here. We could see, and I think you have some video of a Patriot streaking through the sky, but we did not see any contact point from here, Diane.
All right, we're seeing right now one of the Patriot missiles, apparently, that intercepted one of the 2 Scuds that the Pentagon has now confirmed came in to eastern Saudi Arabia today. There were reports earlier, of course, of Scud missiles traveling toward Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. We want to check now with Barry Dunsmore because we were told at the Pentagon that perhaps some anti-missile missiles were fired as a kind of precautionary move, but there was no report there of any Scud missiles coming in. Barry, is that what you're hearing in Riyadh as well? Barry Dunsmore. We don't seem to be able. Barry, can you hear me?
In the bomb shelter, we were told that 2 incoming missiles had been destroyed 17 miles outside of Riyadh. That information clearly was incorrect, but it was given to us by a United States military officer. It turns out that the information he got dealt with a situation in Dhahran, not in Riyadh. Once again, the fog of war, I suppose one might say.
It is certainly better to be safe by many, many miles. Can we ask you there, how much warning did you have? What kind of air raid warning did you have?
Well, we have the regular air raid warning, plus there is a hotel warning where actually the fire alarm goes off in 5-second intervals, and one is supposed to head for the bomb shelter and suit up into the chemical and biological and nuclear suits along with the gas masks. We didn't have time, or one normally doesn't have time to do all of that and get down 5 stories to a bomb shelter. But it all takes place very quickly.
Because, Mortine, you seem to have very little warning today. You heard the explosions before or simultaneously with the air raids, right?
Yeah, Diane, I heard one loud bang, and that got my attention. And then I heard the first wail of the sirens. And then it took a while longer before we heard the rapid sound of several other Patriot anti-missile missiles being launched.
All right. Thank you very much, Mortine. I want to check in with Bob Zelnick at the Pentagon because I want to talk to him about these POW reports and the reports that the Iraqis may have several allied POWs now. And we are told, of course, that Saddam Hussein said earlier today that he would abide by the Geneva Conventions. But tell us, remind us, Bob, exactly what that means. What is he agreeing to when he says that?
Well, he is agreeing to the humane treatment of prisoners of war, that they can't be made exhibits, they can't be tortured, and that they have the rights to reveal only their names and nationalities and the service with which they're identified, and cannot be tortured into revealing military secrets.
There was a report earlier today that the Iranian news agency was saying that it had pictures of American pilots being paraded through the streets of Baghdad blindfolded. And of course, we all remember the incendiary pictures of hostages in Iran being blindfolded and led through the streets. Does the Geneva Convention cover that? And also, what have you heard about it?
Well, apparently there are 2 sets of pictures that have been referred to in foreign press reports, principally Iranian. One involved 2 prisoners, and our information is that those individuals were British, not Americans. Now, there's a second report that deals with allegedly 7 prisoners of war who were actually interrogated to a limited extent in the video, and that one is the one that the Pentagon hasn't seen.
All right, Bob Zelnick, our thanks to you at the Pentagon, and of course to Morton Dean and to Barry Dunsmore. We'll have more on World News Sunday, and we hope you'll be with us all afternoon. This is ABC News.
This has been an ABC News Go.
But one lawmaker speaking on a Sunday network talk show said the longer the war goes on, the less public support it will have.
Saddam Hussein does not need to win the war. He doesn't need to win the battles. All he has to do is keep this war going and to create casualties. And if he does that over a period of time, then you're going to see an erosion of support for the war. Now, that's the worst-case scenario. None of us hopes that happens.
The United States has announced the recipient of the first Purple Heart of Operation Desert Storm. He is Navy medic Clarence D. Connor of Banning, California. Connor was wounded in the shoulder Thursday when the Marine unit he was with traded gunfire with Iraqi troops along the Kuwaiti border. The Kuwaiti flag was lowered over occupied Kuwait months ago, but the country's military pilots still fly under their national flag. Rick Salinger reports on the Kuwaiti Air Force and its contribution to the Allied air campaign.
The multinational Air Force. Some countries are here fighting for a principle. This squadron is fighting to regain its home. The Air Force of Kuwait, looking forward to Liberation Day.
I cannot tell you how much every Kuwaiti will feel at that day. They are already feeling very happy. They know that the day is coming.
But first, they must win a war. These 20 A4 Skyhawks were flown out of Kuwait when the Iraqis invaded. They destroyed 21 enemy helicopters in the process. Now they carry a personalized message on each return trip back home.
It's not that good feeling you want to see destroying some parts of your country and flying over Kuwait. But if it is, that's what it takes to free my country, I'll do it.
He said he and the others of this unit are willing to die for their country. One nearly did.
On the first day of the war, Colonel Mohammed Mubarak flew his fighter into Kuwait but was shot down by the Iraqi anti-aircraft artillery. Word has now reached here that he is all right in the hands of the Kuwaiti resistance.
His fellow pilots dropped their cluster and 500-pound bombs, realizing while they are destroying part of Saddam Hussein's forces, they are also destroying a bit of Kuwait. But these pilots understand it is necessary to drive their enemy out.
You know, the Iraqi done a lot of things, you know, tortures people, stole everything, the one in the country, kills people, rape the country.
The war has given these flyers the opportunity to return to their country for the first time in nearly 6 months. They hope the day will be soon when they will be able to fly there and land in a free Kuwait. Rick Salinger, CNN, in eastern Saudi Arabia.
The Jordanian Senate is calling for an end to the fighting and a negotiated settlement. The lawmakers' speeches reflected the pro-Iraqi feelings running high in the country, scorning the Arab nations aligned with the United States.
It is impossible. How can we stay neutral when our Iraqi brothers are bombed and rocketed, when the civilians are subjected to death, Iraqi blood is running? We just cannot be neutral in this. We are in it.
The Philippine government is ordering Iraq's general consul in Manila to leave the country. He's reportedly being expelled for allegedly linked to Saturday's failed bomb attack against a U.S. government library in Manila. The war in the Gulf has prompted scores of protests across the U.S. In Iowa Sunday, more than 2,000 people attended what's being called the largest peace rally in that state's history. After listening to speeches at the city civic center, the protesters marched through downtown carrying signs that said, "No war for oil," and "Bring the troops home alive." Demonstrators hoisting American flags and chanting USA made their way through downtown Atlanta Sunday. Police say 2,000 people took part in a march to the CNN Center to call for more media coverage of American support for the war. They also expressed solidarity with U.S. forces in the Gulf. That rally started in front of Georgia's state capitol. While most of the world's attention is focused on the war, there is tension in the Soviet Republic of Latvia. Soviet commandos reportedly have left the parliament building in the capital city of Riga just hours after they seized control of that building in a gun battle. Latvian officials say 5 people were killed in the shootout between black berets and police loyal to the nationalist government. Latvia's Council of Ministers reportedly gathered for an emergency session. Protesters on 2 continents demonstrated against the Soviet crackdown in the Baltic republics. In Moscow, hundreds of thousands of demonstrators protested against the government policies and called for President Mikhail Gorbachev to step down. And in San Francisco, about 100 people gathered to express solidarity with the citizens of the Baltic republics. And up next in CNN headline Consumer News, the Gulf War's effect on oil markets.
This is CNN Headline News.
The music you love is part of your life. Now, there's an easy way to collect the world's most beautiful music. Announcing great composers from Time Life Music. Start with the greatest music of Mozart. More than 2 full hours of his very best works at the remarkable low price of only $9.99 for 2 compact discs or 2 double-length cassettes. Great Composers brings you the most memorable music of Bach, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, Chopin, all the great masters in crisp, clear sound. Every volume features one great composer, yours to preview at no risk. Keep only the albums you want. There's no minimum to buy, and you may cancel anytime. So call now to enjoy Mozart for a 10-day free audition and discover music you'll enjoy for a lifetime. Here's how to order.
To order, call 1-800-477-8500. That's 1-800-477-8500. Or send just $9.99 for 2 cassettes or 2 compact discs, plus $3.50 shipping and handling to Mozart's P.O. Box 1880, Department CK, Alexandria, Virginia.
Child Quest International, a non-profit corporation devoted to the recovery and protection of missing, abused, and exploited children, wishes to thank these people for their assistance and donations. But right now, Child Quest needs your help. The picture on your screen represents one of the most heinous crimes in America today, missing children. Look closely. If you can help in any way, call the 800 number listed immediately. For information concerning Child Quest, call the office during normal working hours at the 408 number. And thank you for your assistance in keeping hope alive.
Finance ministers and central bank presidents from the largest industrial powers are meeting in New York. The so-called Group of Seven is looking for ways to keep the war from throwing world financial markets into turmoil. They're also discussing efforts to ensure the recessions facing the United States, Britain, and Canada don't become severe enough to trigger a global downturn. Oil analysts say the crude market will be volatile throughout the war, rising and falling based on reports from the front. Former Saudi minister Sheikh Yamani predicts that in the end, prices will be lower. He points to increased output by Saudi Arabia and other OPEC members. Other experts say the war may significantly affect the cartel's balance of power.
When this conflict is over, you'll find OPEC will reemerge, but in a very different way from the way it existed in the past. You'll find Saudi Arabia will be the dominant force, and its own policies, its own objectives will lead the way for the other OPEC countries.
At the end of trading Friday in New York, U.S. benchmark crude stood at a 6-month low, settling at $19.25 a barrel. The Gulf War has prompted Lloyd's of London to do business on Sunday for the first time in its 300-year history. The insurance company says it opened because it can quote rates only 24 hours ahead on Gulf War policies. Some tanker and aircraft insurance rates have doubled in the past few days. Trans World Airlines reportedly is laying off 1,500 flight attendants because of the Gulf situation. The Flight Attendants Union says the airline told it of those plans Saturday. There's been no confirmation from TWA. However, last week, the airline suspended service between Europe and 4 Middle Eastern and Mediterranean cities, partly because of higher insurance rates. The shutdown of Eastern Airlines is said to be causing surprisingly few disruptions for air travelers. A Continental spokesman says there's been a fairly smooth transition as former competitors accommodate Eastern ticket holders. Florida's Labor Secretary says he'll open 2 temporary employment offices in Miami to assist newly jobless Eastern employees. 7,000 of Eastern's 19,000 employees live in the Miami area. The latest from the Persian Gulf up next. And then the Super Bowl teams are set.
This young stockbroker and his boss have something in common. The boss's wife.
Rising up this organization is easier than you ever dreamed possible.
Feed me, Smoke.
He may find the overtime's a killer.
What the blazes is going on here?
It's a side of Wall Street you thought you'd never see. Martin Mull, Christopher Plummer, Daniel Stern, and of course, the boss's wife.
Thursday night at 8 on TV 36.
I want to be a doctor, a judge, electrical engineer, a chemist, a dentist.
The American dream is alive, nurtured in part by the United Negro College Fund. The fund reaches out to deserving students with a quality education, an education that turns wonderful young dreams into realities.
I want to be president.
And you'll be tough to beat.
Please, support the United Negro College Fund.
So you think he's a wimp? Okay, so he's kind of furry animals. And even kids.
I think he needs a good swift kick in the butt.
A real nice guy.
Hey!
But this angel's got an attitude.
My boss isn't going to like that.
And a boss you don't want to mess with.
Listen, I'm going to need a little miracle.
Michael Landon, Highway to Heaven.
Weekdays at 4 on KICU TV 36.
Here's your chance to be at Super Bowl 25 in Tampa. Call 1-800-876-KICU. Then watch for your name on TV 36. Call 1-800-876-KICU.
I'm Tori Atali with a Gulf War update. Baghdad is offering proof it's captured Allied pilots. On Sunday, Iraqi TV presented 7 airmen it identified as prisoners of war, 3 Americans, 2 Britons, an Italian, and a Kuwaiti. A government source tells CNN U.S. officials believe Baghdad has subjected those men to physical and mental coercion, and the State Department has lodged a formal protest. American military officials say Iraq fired a total of 10 Scud missiles at Saudi Arabia Sunday. 9 were intercepted and 1 fell harmlessly into the Gulf waters. But if these pictures from Riyadh are any indication, at least 1 Scud, or anti-missile missile, did some damage in the Desert Kingdom. The Philippine government has ordered a senior Iraqi diplomat to leave the country, saying there's strong evidence linking him to a recent terrorist activity in Manila. That's the latest. I'm Tori Atali.
I'm Jerome Juranovich, CNN Headline Sports. The mighty have fallen. New York knocked Joe Montana out of the NFC Championship game and knocked the ball loose from Roger Craig at the end. As a result, San Francisco's shot at a record 5th Super Bowl title went through the uprights as Matt Barr kicked a 42-yard game-winning field goal as time expired, giving the Giants a come-from-behind 15-13 victory.
Anytime you're able to accomplish what we did today on the road against an organization that I think all organizations in the National Football League aspire to emulate, you have to feel good. And I'm going to tell you guys, I feel great.
Quite the opposite story in the AFC Championship game where Buffalo rumbled to a record rout of the Raiders. The Bills' defense picked off 6 passes, while Jim Kelly threw for 300 yards and 2 scores as Buffalo cruised to a 51-3 victory.
The way I look at it is we can always stop ourselves. We get so much talent, but, you know, we just go into each and every game trying to prepare and try to find different things that we can do to utilize what we have on our side of the ball.
I felt going into the ball game, and I relate this on to my teammates. If we scored early, we could get them out of their game plan. And I thought we would score, but not like we did.
Portland picked up franchise victory number 900 in Sunday's only NBA action. Kevin Duckworth scored 21, and Danny Ainge hit a critical tray at the end to lead the Blazers by the Bucks 116-112. In the only top 25 play, Tracy Murray scored 26 as 9th-ranked UCLA beat California for the 61st time in their last 64 tries, 98-81. Jerome Juranovich, CNN Headline Sports.
This is CNN Headline News.
Investing? Bob taught me the ropes, but he was missing something big. Commission discounts. He picks his own investments, rarely takes his broker's advice, but he was paying full commissions. So, market rookie that I am, I tell him how much I save at Charles Schwab, and now he's got Schwab on speed dial. Bob may not need investment advice, but he could sure use help with those chopsticks.
Advantages. We both have Schwab accounts, but I've got the edge. We both have Schwab One, the brokerage account with free checking. Both save on commissions, and both earn income between investments. My old broker charged $80 for an account with checking. At Schwab, we pay zip. But I've still got Jack beat, because I can find my Schwab checkbook.
For a free Schwab fax kit, call toll-free 800-257-1333. That's 800-257-1333.
We give you more ways to succeed.
In other news, the communist government of Albania reportedly will release hundreds of political prisoners by the end of the month. A human rights activist says he's been told about 200 prisoners of conscience will be freed, but there is no official confirmation. More than 400 political prisoners have been released since June. 2 Yugoslavian republics are preparing for the possibility of a government crackdown. Officials in Croatia and Slovenia say local militias are preparing in case federal troops move in. The republics and their non-communist governments want greater freedom from Yugoslavia. They fear a crackdown while world attention is focused on the Gulf War. When Allied pilots are shot down behind enemy lines, a plan to rescue them begins immediately. Christopher Mann describes that procedure.
The pilots who are flying round-the-clock combat missions over Iraq and Kuwait are well-trained on what to do if they're shot down over enemy territory. When a crew is listed as missing, it means just that. Not that they've been killed or captured, only that they didn't make it safely back to base. Unless there's been a direct hit by a guided missile, the usual reason for losing an aircraft is battle damage to the engine, so there's every chance of a crew surviving. In combat, planes operate in pairs, and if a crew ejects, they'll normally be watched over by an accompanying aircraft. The wingman won't circle the spot. That would give away the position to watchers on the ground. Instead, he'll fly wide figures of 8 to help the radar operators in AWACS aircraft controlling the air battle. The AWACS also listens in on emergency frequencies, the signals from crew members' rescue beacons. A single pulse will give the exact position where they landed and an idea of where they'll be waiting to be rescued. Every Allied flyer goes through very tough courses on escape and evasion from searching enemy troops and on combat survival. All carry pistols and survival knives. Their emergency packs contain sweets and concentrated foods for energy, some water and a desert still for collecting dew at night, first aid kits, signal flares, maps and compasses. The moment it's known that a crew is missing, search and rescue work begins. The Americans are reckoned to be the world's leading experts in rescuing survivors from behind enemy lines, techniques they developed in the Vietnam War. Their Super Jolly Green Giant helicopters are fitted with some of the world's most advanced night vision systems. And during every Allied air raid, the Super Jollies will be circling at prearranged points, aiming to reach Allied pilots before searching Iraqi troops can get to them.
The crews who eject in this current campaign, because of, first of all, the ejection seat, which their predecessors didn't have, a deck-level ejection seat, the backup organization which exists, they've got probably a better chance of survival than any of their predecessors in any air war. I hope so.
So far, the attrition rate has been astonishingly low. In the next few days, others will fail to return. But pilots who bail out behind enemy lines will know that the sheer severity of the bombing raids has reduced the danger of capture. Most Iraqi troops are themselves simply trying to survive.
Well, the Gulf conflict brings its own brand of military slang. Terms include MRE, or meals ready to eat. Sortie, a single combat mission by a single military plane. SAM, for surface-to-air missile. Smart bombs, bombs guided by onboard video or laser systems. AAA for anti-aircraft artillery. And a Gulf original, the Beach, which refers to the Saudi desert. That's our report this half. Thanks for joining us. I'm Bob Lozier. Around the world in 30 minutes. This is CNN Headline News.
This is CNN Headline News.
Malcolm is harmless. Malcolm is a genius. And ever since the day Frank and Judith moved in, Malcolm is wanted.
Get back. Watch it!
In God's name, got his head.
Cops wouldn't know where to start looking. He never left his bedroom.
Malcolm, a comedy of hopes and schemes.
Monday night at 8 on TV 36.
Have been very ineffective. President Bush is angry. He returned to Washington from Camp David this morning. He spoke briefly with reporters outside the White House, telling them that Saddam Hussein will be held accountable for his brutal treatment of POWs.
I would make the strongest appeal that these people be treated properly, that they be given the treatment that is accorded to them under the international conventions. And they are not being. And America is angry about this, and I think the rest of the world is.
Americans saw for the first time today pictures of some of the 7 Allied pilots captured by Iraqi forces. The pilots, including 3 Americans, were paraded on Iraqi TV. The 3 U.S. airmen have been identified as Marine Corps Warrant Officer Guy Hunter Jr., Lieutenant Colonel Cliff Acree, and Lieutenant Jeffrey Norton Zahn. Zahn, who was stationed at Camp Pendleton in Southern California, spoke with frequent pauses in a shaky voice.
And my father and my sister, I am well treated, and that they should pray for peace.
4 other Allied pilots were also put on Iraqi TV. These pictures are of 2 British airmen. They appeared to be in about the same condition as the Americans. They spoke slowly, and their voices were strained. And they also denounced the war against Iraq. The other pilots were from Italy and Kuwait. The International Red Cross is crying out against the treatment of the Allied airmen captured by Iraqi forces. The group says the TV broadcasts and Saddam's threat to move the pilots to bombing targets is against international safeguards on treatments of prisoners. The Red Cross is responsible for making sure world leaders comply with the Geneva Convention. Under the laws of that convention, prisoners who refuse to answer questions may not be threatened, insulted, or exposed to any unpleasant treatment. President Bush isn't the only world leader condemning Iraq's treatment of the Allied POWs. John Major, the British Prime Minister, is calling the TV broadcasts inhumane, illegal, and against international law. Like most of the other Allied leaders, he believes it violates the laws of the Geneva Convention. There's no let-up in the Allied bombing of Iraqi targets. Warplanes continue to pound Iraqi forces in Baghdad and in Kuwait. The U.S. military says more than 8,000 bombing runs have been flown since the war started 5 days ago. Scud missile sites are still a key target for warplanes. U.S. Patriot missiles managed to blow up 9 Iraqi Scud missiles aimed at Saudi Arabia yesterday. The only damage from the attack was caused by a Patriot missile that apparently misfired and crashed into Riyadh, the Saudi capital. The missile smashed into a 3-story building and then hit the ground, blasting a 6-foot crater. No one was seriously hurt. In Israel, a top U.S. official toured the damage done by Iraqi Scud missile attacks in Tel Aviv. And as Bill McLaughlin reports now, Israelis are thanking Americans for deploying Patriot missiles.
Tel Aviv's Mayor Shlomo Lahat played tour guide for Bush administration officials here today, showing them the craters and damage left behind by last week's Iraqi Scud missile attacks. Deputy Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger, leading the delegation, is the highest-ranking American official to visit Israel since the war began. He arrived shortly after the U.S. completed its emergency airlift of Patriot missile batteries to Israel on Saturday. The missiles are not meant just to protect Israel. Washington hopes their presence and the dramatically improved U.S.-Israeli relationship they symbolize will help restrain Israel from striking back at Iraq on its own. Israeli officials like Army Chief of Staff Dan Shomron are promising that Israel will strike back, but in its own time. Shomron encouraged Israelis to get back to work in areas like Jerusalem, which seem less a target of Iraq's missiles. Life in Jerusalem, as in much of Israel, is beginning to get back to normal, and people here took time off to cheer the United States for sending the Patriots to protect Israel.
As you've been hearing, bad weather has been a factor in the number of missions pilots have been able to fly over Iraq. We'll check in now with Bob Hallman, who's standing by in the Weather Center for the latest on the Gulf. Hi, Bob.
Lauren, you're right. We've had some cloud cover. Of course, this is the rainy season, or at least the start of it in that portion of the world. For Iraq and Kuwait, the wettest months